you're spoiling the surprise. Many of y'all have seen him as the background character in many of my other videos. However, I figured there's no time like the present to introduce him as the main character that he really is. Internet friends, I would like to formally introduce you to my puppy, Bonsai. Hey, Bo. Goodbye! Bo says hi. I've seen a lot of creators come on here and do a solo, dedicated video about all their pets, but it seems a little bit overdone. So instead, I'm going to take a page out of the creator of Dilbert's book, who basically said, if you cross-contaminate two pseudo-separate areas of interest into one, you get a fun niche that more people might find interest in. So I like drawing, I like storytelling, so if I cross the two, you have today's video. Today, I'm not only going to showcase you the results of doing the 20 Art Styles Challenge, which was a really popular activity for online artists to do kind of back in the 2015s, and use that as the opportunity to also show 20 fun facts about my dog, Bonsai. So with that all being said, let's jump straight into prompt number 1, which was Bluey. I think the best thing to talk about for fact number 1 is, what is Bo? Bo is a Bichon Frise, which is a breed originating from the Spain and Mediterranean region of Europe. The breed is really known for being very lovable, very affable, happy, energetic, and one of the main reasons I ended up picking this breed was because they are hypoallergenic and do not shed. I found Bo through a reputable AKC breeder down in Houston, Texas, and I picked him up on January 8th, so I've had him for just a little bit over a calendar year. Bichon Frise is a really popular breed in North America, oftentimes seen as like a really easy poodle substitute. And actually, as of 2016, was a recent winner of the Westminster Dog Show with Flynn as the winning dog. So for prompt number 2, I want to take a little bit of a different route, less so a popular cartoon or anime, and more so an artist that I really look up to named Kaori Watanabe. If you happen to watch Terrace House back when it was airing, she was one of the cast members on the last season and has since become a really prolific illustrator for companies like Chanel and Longchamp. For prompt number 2, I figured we could talk about his name. Now you'll hear me interchangeably refer to him as Bo and Bonsai. Bonsai obviously is his full name, Bo for short. One of the reasons that I picked Bonsai is because another staple of the breed is how often they have to be groomed. Honestly, this is why a lot of people do not go with Bichon Frises, even though they are that hypoallergenic, low-shedding breed, is because of how much upkeep they take. Daily brushing is required, if not more so than like twice a day, which is what I try to do. And there's constant needing for groom. Right now, I'm actually in the process of learning how to do it myself, which is why he kind of looks like shit. But at least the head shape is pretty good, and that's what I'm ultimately going for most. So obviously a lot of trimming, a lot of manicuring, hence the name Bonsai. Also for the fact that these little breeds especially live forever. I'm lucky enough to have had 2 Bichons in my past, once when I was really, really young and one that passed away unfortunately recently, and both lived to be over 16, so for dog years, that's pretty insane. Going back to more well-known art and cartoons for prompt number 3, I decided to do the style from Don Bluth's All Dogs Go to Heaven. And for my fun fact, maybe kind of focus on Bo's coming home story. Like I said, we went through the American Kennel Club to find a reputable Bichon breeder down in Houston, Texas. On pickup day, I was lucky enough to have my mom come down and help me because Bo was actually the first dog I've owned by myself. Both of my other Bichons were family dogs, so it was much more my parents' doing of the finding and bringing home and raising of versus Bo, who was my first independent dog. I hate it when dog owners compare things to babies because I know in my heart and my mind they are not similar. However, there is a moment of similarity when they just let you go home with the living thing. The second that Bo was in his carrier in the car and we were driving home to Dallas, I felt this like overwhelming panic of like, oh my God, this whole life is now dependent on me, essentially. I was terrified for the drive. It's about a 2.5, 3 hour drive occasionally from Dallas to Houston, but lucky for us, he pretty much slept the whole time. He didn't have a single accident in the car, and so all felt well until we got home. The second that we got home, I let my mom return to her hotel, and that is when shit hit the fan. After reading and listening to tons and tons and tons of training literature, all the trainers recommend starting crate training from day 1. So that's what we did. When it came time for bedtime, I put him in his crate, and then he had a conniption. I ended up sleeping on the couch, but he about cried till about 3 o'clock in the morning. Luckily, he only did that for about 1 or 2 nights, but man, that was an eye-opening experience, how hard it really is to raise a puppy when you're on your own. Not gonna lie, I needed to fill in the blank for prompt number 4. I had a lot of other difficult ones lined up, so I picked Crayon Shin-Chan as the number 4 prompt. Since that's a quick prompt, I'll keep this to a quick fun fact. One of the favorite things I ever bought for Bo, I bought years before I ever owned him. Back in 2018, my friends and I went to Japan, and at that time I thought I was getting a dog a lot sooner. It was there that I ran into this unbelievably cute boutique dog store and became obsessed with not only the fact that they had little tiny kimonos and yukata for dogs, but they also had a BB-8 dog bed. At the time, I was really obsessed with Star Wars. At the time, I also thought I was going to name him Poe. So Poe, BB-8, it seemed like perfection. It became a pretty big running joke in my friend group how I had all this dog stuff and no dog, but eventually, joke's on them, now it's one of his favorite places to sleep. After having a pretty good paid cop-out for prompt number 4, I wanted to raise the difficulty level again and do one of my favorite brands growing up, which was Neopets. For fun fact number 5, I'll talk about one of Bo's weaknesses. Walking. For the longest time, he really struggled with walking on a leash. Not leash etiquette or like pulling or things like that, just not wanting to walk. We'd make it halfway around the block and he would totally pancake his little body and refuse to walk any further. All the passersby would look at me like I was some sort of monster attempting to drag a 3-pound dog or encourage him to get back up. But what they didn't know is we had only started walking 10 minutes beforehand. I was really desperate to find a remedy because one of the things I love to do is long walks. There's a trail near my house, which I usually spend about 4 miles walking on, and I liked having his exposure on that trail too. He met a lot of people, he met a lot of dogs, so it was a great socialization opportunity, but he never wanted to walk. I tried to figure out a solution and eventually landed on one. But he does have a dog backpack. And not only does he have a dog backpack, he loves the dog backpack. So essentially, I'll take him out on this trail, I'll have him walk until he's completely done, which is now at about a mile, which is actually pretty good. But whenever he's done, he will signal to me that he wants to go into his backpack. I will put him in his backpack like Yoda on Dagobah, and I will go on my merry way. Because that way, I don't have to go all the way home to drop him off. And I still get to finish my walk. He gets exposure to people. It's a win-win for both of us. If you're looking for a recommendation, I really love this canine bag. I'll put the link to it down below in case anyone wants one. I would argue prompt number 6 was by far the hardest one I did, which was styling Bo in the style of a VTuber, specifically Korone. This, I believe, is the longest one, so I'll give you a little bit of a story for fact number 6. Bo has had a pretty charmed life where I can't really think of any bad experiences that he's had aside from one, his haircut. Now, we had been using an app where basically you can select from a variety of groomers to come and groom him. At the time, I was still learning how to do the Bichon cut, so I was relying on external groomers to keep him well manicured. His first groom went great. I think the lady that came in, she came into my house, she had everything set up, she did a phenomenal job, and he was super well behaved. So it was great to be able to see that not only was she doing a good job, but he was behaving as he should. But unfortunately, for the second time, I went to request her again, and she was no longer available through the app. The gentleman that I ended up picking wasn't one of the ones that had the in-house opportunity. So if there had been something going wrong, there was no way for me to tell. Instead, he brought his entire truck, so I walked outside, dropped Bo off at the truck, and would come back when he notified me that he was done. I'll give myself credit. I do not come to these hair cutting appointments unprepared. The Bichon cut is not an easy cut, so I come with very specific reference photos as to what I'm looking for. I do not want Cocker Spaniel ears, I do not want a shaved poodle body. There are a lot of specific attributes that Bichons have, so I always provide photo reference. And that's exactly what I did for this gentleman. I gave him exact parameters as far as what I wanted. He confirmed he could do those, and we went on our merry way. When I went to pick him up, I did not recognize my dog. Now, prior to this groom, he had recently been to the vet. He had just been fixed, and so he had a little tiny shaved spot on his arm where the IV had been placed. Now, as the groomer was handing me back the dog, which was my dog to my horrific acknowledgement, he said, I went ahead and evened him out. Well, he had evened him out to where doctor had shaved down his arm. Essentially, he had turned Bo from an adorable, puffy cloud boy into a fucking baked chicken dog. I had never seen a Bichon with such a horrific haircut. And not only did he look bad, not only did this open him up to a variety of skin conditions like sunburn, but on top of that, there is a huge perception for dog owners that if you have a long-haired breed that is severely shaved, it is usually because you didn't take good care of him. It usually means that you did not brush him, you did not keep his hair clean or well groomed enough, and it ended up being matted. So now, not only do I have a dog that looks like a honey baked ham, but people are going to think that's because I was a bad owner. I don't think I said anything to the man while he was handing him back. I was so stunned, I just couldn't find the words. It took months for him to grow back, and it was on that day that I vowed that I would take over grooming as long as it was feasible for me to do so moving forward. So after that huge exhaustion of artistic energy, I think it's wise to go back to a rather easier one for prompt number 7, which I picked Tokidoki. Tokidoki is an Italian designer actually. They replicate that kind of kawaii Japanese style, but they are Italian owned. And I'm currently addicted to their Unicorno blind boxes. So with that in mind, I picked them as prompt number 7. Obviously, y'all are getting a taste of it right now, literally and pun intended, but I think it'd be fun to talk about his favorite foods. Bo is actually a pretty picky eater, which is nice for weight management of him, but not so nice for trying to keep him motivated. It took a lot of trial and error to figure out what he really likes, but we've settled on a few good winners. The weirdest and first initial win we found out is that he is addicted to carrots. I had been trying treat brand after treat brand, trying to figure out something that he liked, but he would just basically spit most of them out until one day he got a rogue baby carrot that I had dropped, and we figured out that's one of his favorite treats. In a similar vein, he also likes celery, and then as it turned into summer, this also turned into a love of watermelon. His favorite love are these braided bully sticks, as you can tell, as he wants it back right now. He goes through them like a beaver. It's nuts how fast he can get through these big braided sticks. If you want to know what they're made of, look it up. It's gross, and I always try to forget that while I'm holding one. Going back to something a little bit more difficult for prompt number 8, I picked Digimon. Now, since you've seen him do it a couple of times in this video alone, I want to talk about my favorite trick he does, which we call Happy Hand. Let's see if we can get him to do it. There he goes, Happy Hands. I've never had a dog that really does any trick instinctually. You see a lot of dog trainers recommend if there's some sort of behavior your dog does that could be easily molded into a trick, those are the ones they're gonna have the best aptitude for. And so that's exactly what I did with Bo. Initially, while he was being trained and learned that barking was no longer something he should be doing inside, he resorted to doing that. He'd sit up on his back legs, put his 2 paws together, and kind of whine and shake his hands for attention, which obviously works like a charm. Eventually, we molded that into the command where I kind of snap my hands like an alligator, or when I say clap, or when other people do happy hands in front of him. It's the best crowd-pleasing trick, and ultimately really helped with cutting down on his barking too. So prompt number 9, I thought we kind of go back and forth between difficult and easy. So I settled on Sanrio's Aggretsuko for prompt number 9. Since that whole show kind of revolves around office relationships and co-working relationships, I should talk about Bo's relationships. One of his favorite places to go in the world is the DOG-PARK. Can't say it, he'll get triggered. Early on after getting him, essentially once he was fully neutered and healed, I had him going to a really popular dog park in the area. There are a couple of reasons for this. First of all was energy management. Like I mentioned before, he's a really high energy dog, and I needed a way for him to really burn off as many calories as possible without having that be completely dependent on me. But even more so, my reason was socialization. I mentioned that before with visiting the trail that's near our house, but something that's so critical, especially for young dogs, is socialization. I needed to find some way that A, he wouldn't be obsessively dependent on my attention, and also make sure that he felt safe and confident around other dog breeds of all sizes and shapes. There's a lot of good size and bad size to dog parks. This one in particular is pretty good because not only does it have constant attendees monitoring the dogs in addition to you, but they separate dogs by size. Lucky for me, there's not a tremendous amount of people in Dallas with tiny dogs, so it's usually me and maybe 3 other dogs, which was perfect for him to get comfortable. Prompt number 10, had to do it, it's always part of these art challenges, is My Little Pony. In the spirit of cutesy MLP, let's talk about what Bo hates. Clothes. Now luckily, I'm not a huge fan of clothes for dogs, especially small breeds. They're supposed to be treated like raised like dogs, and oftentimes their size and their cuteness make people have a tendency to give them a free pass for bad behavior. I think that's encouraged by things like cute clothes. However, there are times when clothes are appropriate. First of all is weather. With his hair, it would be so nice if he was comfortable wearing a raincoat now and then. However, time after time, attempt after attempt, the second that he has clothing on him, he just refuses to move. It's like he becomes completely immobile. The middle area that we have found is really fun bow tie collar. One of our recent faves was the plaid bow tie collar that you'll also see not only showcased in the Kaori Watanabe style, but also in all of our Christmas pictures. Style number 11, also a huge staple of these 20 art style challenges, which will be Butch Hartman's Fairly Odd Parents or Danny Phantom, whatever you prefer. Since this is the theme of wishes, let's talk about one of Bo's all-time greatest wishes, which is ultimately to get the peanut butter jar. One of the treats that we didn't mention, ironically, in the treat portion of the Q&A was the fact that he is obsessed with peanut butter. He'll pretty much do anything for peanut butter, so we use it as a motivational tool a lot. Now because he's so tiny, usually he only gets a very small amount, but eventually that does polish off an entire jar. If he's ever been really, really good, and we have a completely empty peanut butter jar, I will cut it down so that his head can actually fit onto the entirety of the bottom and let him have the rest of the peanut butter in the jar. He'll obsess about it all day. It's actually also really nice if I need some like really dedicated focus time because it'll occupy him for hours, and ultimately is one of his favorite treats that he gets. Prompt number 12, again a huge staple, is Adventure Time. Speaking of adventure, despite his size and his overall wimpy attitude about a lot of things, he's been a really adventurous dog so far. Not only has he gained a lot of confidence with talking to big and small breeds of any size, as well as small groups of people, to going to SMU football games with huge amounts of people, but probably the most adventurous thing that he's done thus far is gone paddleboarding. Despite having never gone swimming before and not really being a huge fan of being wet, he did really, really well. We started him off in the kayak just so that he got a good sensation of how it felt to be on the water, and made sure to have a pretty well-fitting life jacket for him as well. But once he really got his sea legs, we placed him gently on the paddleboard and he took off. He never fell in. He only cried a little bit towards the end once he was getting pretty wet. And then we actually used it as an opportunity to start teaching him how to swim. So he was probably the happiest at the end, but it was a good use of time and him already being wet with lake water. Unlucky prompt number 13 was Hamtaro, which you will see why I say that at the end. Speaking of general unluckiness, one of the weirdest things that happened when Bo was a really, really young puppy was the Dallas ice storm. Very famously in 2021, the Dallas and overall Texas area experienced a tremendously bad snow and ice storm. Because of the way our power grids are set up, it knocked out power, it knocked out heat for thousands and thousands of Texans. And unluckily, this is also when he was an itty bitty baby. Fortunately for us, we happened to be on the same power grid as a hospital, so we never lost power, but having him deal with literally 6 to 7 inch banks of snow while he's only 5 or 6 inches tall was such a nightmare. He never wanted to go outside because it was so cold and so windy. We were having to constantly clear out the snow and make sure that the ice wasn't hurting his paws. Much to his chagrin, I made him wear a damn coat too. And this is all the while too we had to house a few of my friends. There was just so much going on very, very early on in his life. It was a lot, but in the long run, it did probably help him gain confidence, maturity, and also learn that maybe the Texas heat isn't the worst thing in the world. As a close second to the one I hate most in the end is prompt number 14, which was Animal Crossing. Since Animal Crossing is all about cute animals doing cute things, I'll talk about one of my favorite things about Bo that's really cute, which is the fact that he always sleeps on his back. I know it's a pretty standard thing for most dogs. However, the fact that he never, ever sleeps on his stomach is kind of an odd habit, I think. It's rare you catch him sleeping. He's a pretty alert, high energy puppy, as you can tell. But when you do, it's really adorable to always see him just like sprawled out parkour-wise on his back. Since we included Don Bluth's All Dogs Go to Heaven, how could we ever do a 20 art style challenge and not include Disney? Or in this case, 101 Dalmatians by Walt Disney. Since that movie has one of the most amazing Disney nemesises in Cruella de Vil, I want to talk about Bo's nemesises. And by nemesis, I mean just general, usually static objects that he either fears or just generally hates. Most common one on the list are hair clips. He really hates hair clips. He thinks that they are little crocodiles that are trying to get him. So whenever I'm snapping a hair clip, he usually loses his mind. Another thing are feet in shoes. Not feet in general, but if you have a shoe on your foot and you're a little bit too close to him, he acts a little bit skittish. Now obviously he's a tiny dog. Sometimes he'll get bumped around. So I think that's probably where the hatred or fear comes from. But it's sad that it's so prolific where he just will not get near shoes if they're sitting on the ground either. This is particularly for like boots or like Uggs and also ones with a dark color. I've also found he has a hatred of fidget spinners, my Audrey 2 puppet from Halloween last year, as well as the small alligator head that we had from a family trip to Florida. As we enter the final stretch with prompt number 16, I figured that we have to go back to another somewhat humanoid style, so I picked BoJack Horseman. Since a heavy theme of that TV show is poor choices and bad behavior, what are the worst things that Bo still does? Aside from barking at the doorbell, which goddamn I still cannot figure out how to get him to stop doing, one of the most terrorizing times of the day is 10 p.m. 10 p.m. we call the witching hour in this household because at 10 p.m., almost on the dot, he goes absolutely batshit insane. He starts running laps around my entire house. He starts running under the couch and sometimes barking at me from under the couch. One of the weirdest signals though that usually brings an end to the witching hour is him taking a BM outside. We've coined that letting the evil out because the second that he has a good BM at around 10 p.m., usually the bad behavior stops. Alternating back and forth between Japan and America, now it brings us to ultimately one of my favorite brands on earth, which is Pokemon for prompt number 17. Well, since I just shit on him for a little bit, I have to talk about things that he does that I absolutely love too. He's got some really sweet idiosyncrasies. One of my favorites is that if I'm ever laying on my stomach, so if I'm laying on my stomach on the couch to like play PS5, or if I'm on the ground scrolling on TikTok, one of the favorite things that he does is he will butt his way in between so that he is sitting in my arms wherever I'm laying down. Usually it's a selfish attempt to also make me hold his bone for him because he has no thumbs. But it's such a sweet little thing that he does that shows that he really likes spending time with me. Another fun one is how he reacts to me taking phone calls. He's actually a pretty independent dog. Like usually while I'm working, he's roaming my house by himself or looking out the window downstairs. But ever so often he showcases how much he really likes my attention. And it's usually when I'm showing that attention to somebody else. He's gotten so good that he has memorized the sound of my cell phone ringing. So if it's ringing, whatever room he's in, he comes bounding in and watches us have our phone conversation. And then finally, one of the ones that gives me a lot of confidence as a dog trainer is how happy he is in his crate. It's weird that it's seen as such a point of contention in a lot of dog owners to crate or not to crate, because all the major dog trainers really spout the validity of giving dogs their own personal space, their own cave, their own dwelling essentially, to call their specific home. Even though those first few nights were really rough, eventually his crate is turned into something that he really adores. He'll oftentimes go in there on his own when he's tired, and he'll always bring a little stuffed animal with him. So at night, it's really easy to integrate that into the ritual of like me also going to sleep. Eventually, I'd love for him to spend the night in my bed, but he's so comfortable with his pattern and his routine, I would hate to break it this early on. After all, he's just 1 year old. There's plenty of time for slumber parties. And honestly, he's had a few already, so he hasn't been completely deprived. For prompt number 18, which is also a huge staple of these 20 art style challenges, is the Matt Gehring or the Simpsons / Futurama style. Since this is a fast drawing, I'll give you a fast fun fact. I built him a little balcony. So all my Bichons in the past have really loved to look out the window, but unfortunately in my office, the windows are actually pretty high up. They're actually about 3 feet off the ground, which definitely eclipses them from his point of view. I saw this little dog patio essentially online, and so a few weeks ago I bought him one so that not only does he have like a designated spot in my office, but can easily look out the window then while I'm at work. For our penultimate 19th prompt, we have the famous Naruto. Since this will be really evident in the styling at the end, I want to talk about the red marks that have kind of popped up in every one of these pictures. All white breeds, unfortunately, as they're kind of been coined on TikTok as crusty white dogs, are known for having eye boogies. You showing me eye boogies? Yeah, see, they're not too bad. They're usually eclipsed by his mustache most of the time. Now, there's actually 2 types of coloration that you'll see pop up. If they happen to be more red, like how I've styled them in my drawings, that's usually indicative of some sort of infection that should be looked at. However, if they're more brown, like bows, they're usually indicative of possibly something in their diet, the fact that they're weaning, or just a natural byproduct of how their bodies work. I try really hard to keep it clear. One thing that can help is keeping the area well trimmed and manicured to make sure there's nothing interfering with their eyes, but you're always going to get some degree of eye boogies, no matter what dog you've got. And then finally, we've made it to prompt number 20, which I picked Odd Taxi. Odd Taxi was an anime that came out in 2020 in which all the characters were anthropomorphized animals, kind of like a Japanese version of BoJack Horseman. And so for the final fun fact, I want to talk about my favorite Bo accomplishment, which is him being a successful flying dog. If you're ever wanting to fly with a pet, especially a small breed like him, it's definitely not a difficult process as it might seem that it is. Essentially, all you have to do is first go ahead and call the airline and make sure that you can place a reservation for your animal. Most airlines have a specific cap of how many animals can fly per flight. Once that's successfully made, you have to invest in a FAA approved carrier, which not all of them are. You can usually check on the manufacturer's website whether or not they are FAA approved, but usually it means that they are small enough to fit underneath the seat and yet large enough for the animal to stand up and turn around completely. We practice a ton to get him comfortable for when he arrived at his first airport. What do I mean by practicing? Well, first, just giving him treats whenever he would go near or on top of the carrier. I didn't even want to worry about him going physically inside, but I wanted to make sure, similar to how we crate trained him, that that was a good place to be. Once he was comfortable kind of sniffing around and navigating the top of the carrier itself, I stood it up so he could go inside and began throwing treats at the back so that he would go in of his own volition. Whenever he would go inside, I would mark that action with the term fly. For him, learning that command was really easy, but what I was most worried about was the amount of smells and noise that came with riding around inside a confined space, which he had no experience doing. I called ahead to make sure it was okay, but one place that we practiced this was our local mall. I would place him within the carrier, making sure that he went in of his own volition, saying, "Let's go fly," and we would just walk around the mall with him in the carrier. Obviously, it's not the same thing as an airport, but got similar vibes. It's a ton of people, a lot of new smells. There's actually other dogs there as well with the policemen that work there. So it was exposing him to similar things so the airport wouldn't be a tremendously large step for him to do. And then the next step was just to go to the airport. Our flight experience was really, really good. At our local airport, we had a dog relief area, which we went to beforehand. We walked him through the TSA, which had no problems. And when we got there a little bit early, we sat apart from the crowd where I let him out and just kind of chew on his bone while he was in my lap. So he didn't have to spend the entirety of the day confined to his carrier. Flight-wise himself, he pretty much just slept the whole time. He cried a little bit when it landed because I think he was asleep and it woke him up. Other than that, not a single problem. I couldn't have been more proud of him. And with that, it brings us to the end of our final prompt for the 20 Art Styles Challenge. For someone that is just starting to kind of get back into art, doing this challenge was not only fun, but like a really good exercise of identifying what made someone's style their style and trying to replicate that in a way that also showcased what Bo looks like. I hope you've enjoyed this challenge. It's maybe a nice throwback to how many of them were back in 2015. And I hope it's been fun meeting and learning a little bit more about Beau. You'll see him pop up in a lot more videos. If any of you own a Bichon Frise, let me know in the comments below. I love talking to other Bichon owners. There's actually a really great subreddit where we all just post little pictures of our little dumb dogs. So it's been a good time. If you've enjoyed this video, leave me a like or a comment down below. I'd really appreciate getting this shit boosted on the algorithms. This is definitely nothing like anything I've done before. And if you like me and you want to see more of me and or Beau, go ahead and click subscribe down below. Thank you for getting me to 500 subscribers. That has been the best way to start off 2022. Thanks so much for visiting me here today and for joining me in this fun little exercise, and I'll see y'all next time. Cheers.